Bienvenidos, damas y caballeros, a una nueva cita con su salud. Quien les habla, José Urdaneta, complacido de que me permitan estar con ustedes en otro programa para aumentar nuestro conocimiento y tener el control sobre nuestra salud. Hoy estamos en la sede principal de Capital Blue Cross aquí en Harrisburg, acompañados de Julia Mallory, quien es la directora ejecutiva del Mental Health Association of the Capital Region. Y ella nos va a hablar de un tema muy importante, que es la salud mental y las fechas navideñas. Thank you, Julia, for being here with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I was just saying in the introduction that apparently there's some kind of correlation between the holidays and our mental health state for one reason or the other. And it seems that depression is one of the ones that tends to affect us somehow the most during the holiday. Tell us, what is depression?
Depression, there is no one particular cause of depression, but it could be a state of sadness. It ultimately affects a person's mood, their eating habits, and their disposition.
Now, how do we differentiate? Because we all go through life through moments in which we would normally feel sad. And whether the loss of a loved one, job, economic situation, or whatever it may be, that could affect us and make us really sad. How do we differentiate being sad and being depressed?
Typically, while I'm not a clinician, but typically what clinicians look for is an extended period, say for about longer than 2 weeks. So that would be a change in normal patterns for that particular person. So maybe it's their sleep has been affected, either they're sleeping more than usual or they're not sleeping at all. It could also be that they no longer enjoy the activities that they once did. Their appetite changes. So it's usually those symptoms over an extended period of time, usually at least 2 weeks.
And you said something very important, is the fact that a clinician looks for. So who makes and how do they make this diagnosis?
Sure. So usually some people start with their family doctor. They, go to their family doctor and they present these set of symptoms to the family doctor. Some people may go right to a therapist or a psychologist to be able to share these symptoms and look for some sort of remedy.
Now, certainly there has always been some kind of stigma with mental health, and it is overlooked both by us as consumers of healthcare, the same as it is with even some clinicians to look it over. In ourselves, what can we see in a family member or ourselves that makes us think, I need to address this?
I think it really borders on the symptoms or the signs that I presented before, which is, changes in patterns of mood, changes in appetite if a person's not eating enough or eating too much, if a person's sleeping too little or sleeping too much, and also in just their overall mood, no longer enjoying the things that they once did.
Now, what is the rate? How common is it? How common is depression?
Depressive disorders are the most common of mental health concerns in the U.S. In 2012, the most recent national statistics that we have, almost over 32 million people, or 16% of the U.S.
16%?
16% of U.S. adults reported a major depressive episode in their life.
That is a huge percentage. How can we still talk about a stigma when it comes up about something that is so common amongst us?
Because ultimately, while it is a common occurrence, generally only about a third of that population actually seeks any sort of treatment for it. And then also because it's not, people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So it becomes something that lives kind of in secret or under the radar in most people's lives. So for example, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. People will, we will scream that from the
top of our lungs.
The top of our lungs.
Yes.
We will wear pink. People will be proud that they have overcome that. Because there is a welcoming environment that allows people to be proud that they are breast cancer survivors. But for example, October also kicks off Mental Illness Awareness Week, and that is not something that most people will know. So it just generally, the stigma is just because people are not able to talk about it, just because of the fear of a retribution, or
just
being
not the-
seen as being different.
And I think that one of the worst words is "you're crazy."
Yes.
It's just something that runs in your family or something like that. That definitely is not seen as something.
Yeah, it's not
positive.
it's definitely not seen as something as positive. And also, for a lot of people, mental illness is also seen as kind of like a life sentence. And the reality is, especially with depression, with treatment, up to 80 to 90% of people, overcome their depression and live healthy, productive lives.
Now, Julia, why is it that there is a relationship between the holidays and depression? Why do we see the incidence, or at least we feel that it's higher during this time?
Well, there is something called seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, and what happens a lot of times, the relationship there's about 3 factors. So people's, our internal rhythms are kind of thrown off because of the shorter days and longer nights. So that could affect people's, sleeping, just their whole routine gets thrown off. There's also a connection between serotonin levels and sunlight. So because of the reduced sunlight, and people are typically outside a lot less because it's colder in certain places, that also
And you're
affects.
also more covered because you have less skin that is exposed into the sunlight.
Exactly. So that also contributes. There's also another hormone, melatonin, which affects our sleep patterns, which we think there's a reduction of that during colder climates, less sunlight. So the connection between all 3 of those things, can definitely affect.
In other words, we have psychological reasons, but we also have some physical, some
Absolutely.
physiological reasons as to why this happens.
Yes.
So sometimes when we have a family member that we see that is sad over the holidays, just saying, hey, you know what? Get out of it. Listen to some music. Let's dance. It's just not enough.
That could be one of the coping skills or mechanisms that a family could use, but for some people that is not enough.
And you might need the help.
You might need some additional help.
And of course the help is out there. And who do you think the person should talk to first?
As we mentioned first, definitely if you have a family doctor, you definitely want to start there. Because the family doctor also typically has your other health history, so can also make a diagnosis based on maybe some other patterns that they've seen, and they're also typically a lot easier to get in, to get an appointment with than some of the other mental health related clinicians.
And then maybe they may decide to refer you, or they may decide to
and they may be able, and if based on that physician's experience, they may be able to just remedy the situation, in the office, and then maybe you might need some additional supports that they could refer you to.
Julia, we talked about the shorter days, we talked about less exposure to sunlight as one of the reasons why we see more cases of depression over the holidays. What else? What could be other triggers that bring the cases or bring someone to have depression?
Sure. So depression and anxiety are often caused by environmental factors as well as, physiological factors, but then there's also, life circumstances that also contribute to those issues. And so some of those are strained family relationships, economic issues are definitely big.
Having to buy gifts,
trying
and not
to stay
having.
within a budget or not having, much of a budget to work with to begin with. All of those can make someone feel down during the holidays.
So this means that, especially with someone that already knows that they feel that they suffer from depression, or anxiety or stress, that they can prepare. They know this is coming.
Yes.
What are some of the things that we can do to prevent them?
So really identifying what some of those triggers are. If the triggers are strained family relationships, having a way to perhaps navigate those difficult relationships with family, maybe minimizing the time spent with particular family members if they're unhealthy. There's also, some people also experience significant levels of loneliness during the holidays. So if trying to find ways, if the goal is to want to be around people, maybe trying to find ways to find friends or even, community events that...
So this might be the time to say, I'm going to volunteer at the hospital or at you know, the shelter or something like that will keep me
Yes.
around
Are there
people.
any community holiday meals that I could participate in? This would be the time to do so.
Absolutely. There's so many plays and things that happen, and then that keeps your mind away from
And
those
also,
triggers.
as far as economics go, identifying a budget, you know, saying, okay, this is how much money we have to spend and trying to stay within that budget, because sometimes overspending definitely can be a trigger for stress during the holidays.
It seems that then also communication becomes very important, because
Absolutely.
if those that you have to give to understand where you are,
Yes.
it makes it a lot easier.
If you set the expectation, if you set the boundaries, hopefully people in your life will be able to live within those boundaries. And then also even communication, if you know you are someone who is prone to depression or seasonal affective disorder or stress during the holidays, there might be a time when you might have to enlist the help of a loved one or a close friend. And if they are prepared for that, then it is possible that they could step in and help you if you needed the assistance.
Absolutely. So certainly, this is where having some of us have to work a little by ourselves, but maybe you can enlist your family and friends and say, you know what, I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need you to work with me on this, because.
And it's okay to actually write these things down. I mean, if you're a person who likes, you know, to write a list, lists are very helpful during this time. Also, stress and anxiety can throw our routine off. So that's why I like the idea of having a written plan. That way, when your routine gets broken, you have this list that reminds you, oh, I was supposed to do this. Because stress definitely can affect our memory. So
Absolutely.
it's very good if you have a list.
A list.
Yeah. You could put it on your cell phone. You could, put it on your calendar.
Yes.
You can have it on the refrigerator. There's a variety of ways that you could, come up with a list.
But just something that you come back to and really puts you back on track of where you're supposed to be and what is it that you're supposed
Absolutely.
to be doing. Now, I'm thinking, and I know that this sounds naive, but is this something that, is it contagious? Is it that who we're with and what their mood is this something that could also be a trigger?
Oh,
for us?
absolutely. If someone is down, typically, whether through empathy, sometimes we just want to try and connect with that person. I mean, mood can be infectious, it can be contagious. And so we definitely want to be careful who we're surrounding ourselves with, during a time when we're already feeling possibly down ourselves.
Now, there are two common things that happen among many others that happen during the holidays. And it's that we change our patterns of what we eat and we change our patterns of what we drink. How much what we eat or what we drink could affect our mental health state? Well,
absolutely. So we know that nutrition can play a huge role in someone's overall health, and so mental health is part of that. Alcohol can also be a depressant. So a lot of people, if you know that you're someone who's already prone to depression or has already been diagnosed with depression, it's probably best to stay away from alcohol during that time, just because, and even just because of basically sometimes some of the interference with, medications that a person could be on. But alcohol is definitely a depressant for a lot of people. And so during that time, you just definitely have to be careful with your intake.
And making sure that this doesn't become the trigger.
If alcohol, if drinking.
The effect of alcohol may go away, but the depression it puts you in
does
could
not.
stay with you.
Yes.
And that's certainly something to be aware of.
Or if it affects our, sometimes for people it impairs their ability to make good decisions. So if a series of bad decisions have been made based on, someone being impaired by alcohol or other substances, such as, other types of drugs, the effect of those decisions they will remain.
Now, you mentioned something very important there, and it is the medications. And it seems that in a plan, your medication and writing down your to-do list, take your medication, and if you're going to travel, making sure that your medications are filled.
Yes, if you have, and this isn't just for any sort of mental health related, drugs, but for some people, if you already, if you are on medications and you may have some chronic health conditions, you do not want to wait till the busiest day of the holiday season to try and fill your medicine. You want to make sure that you have the number of pills that you need to get through that time. And also, if you're definitely going to be seeing, relatives, or you're going to be on the road, you want to make sure that you are leaving with the filled prescription.
And
it is very difficult sometimes. You may not know that community that you're going into. You don't know if they have a large pharmacy that's open 24 hours, or if they just still have a mom and pop shop that closes at 7 p.m. You want to make sure that you're prepared.
That you're prepared for
Yes.
that. So certainly a great plan is making sure, you're going over to grandma's house for Thanksgiving, and that you have for that long weekend.
You
have
wouldn't
your
try and
medication.
travel on an empty tank of gas, so you wouldn't want to travel on an empty prescription.
Bueno, damas y caballeros, continuando esta conversación, hemos hablado de cosas muy interesantes y una de ellas es de que hablamos de que los días más cortos nos pueden afectar, la falta de sol y toda esa otra serie de cosas, pero resulta que pueden haber durante las fiestas decembrinas otras situaciones que pueden hacer que sobrevenga un ataque de depresión, de ansiedad o de estrés. Y una de las más importantes son exactamente qué sucede durante esta etapa, la compra de regalos. Puede que el hecho de que no tengamos el dinero suficiente para comprar los regalos para todo el mundo que queremos comprar sea una razón para que sobrevenga un ataque de depresión o de estrés o de ansiedad. Pero también en muchas situaciones puede ser el hecho de que en estas etapas es donde recordamos a seres queridos que podamos haber perdido. Eso tienen que ser cosas que tenemos que estar muy pendientes de que eso va a suceder. La visita con familia. A lo mejor hay una situación de estrés porque miembros de la familia nos reunimos a la hora de la mesa y hay ciertas conversaciones que pueden ser incómodas o no. Y eso puede hacer que sobrevenga un ataque de estrés, de ansiedad o de depresión. Pero al mismo tiempo tenemos que tener cuidado que durante esta etapa cambian nuestros patrones de lo que comemos y de lo que bebemos. Y a veces son esas comidas o esas bebidas lo que pueden ser los que disparan un ataque de este tipo. Recuerden que el alcohol puede ser depresivo y a pesar de que el efecto del alcohol se vaya, la depresión en la que quedamos después de haberlo tomado puede que se quede con nosotros y permanezcamos en esa depresión durante la época de las fiestas. Muchas personas simplemente fiestan, mira, piensan, este es el tiempo de estar feliz, ¿por qué no se te quita esta tristeza? Y es que muchas veces simplemente el estar en fiestas, el estar en estas cosas puede ser una forma en la que se nos quita a algunos esa depresión, pero muchos de nosotros probablemente necesitemos de medicamentos o de algún otro tipo de ayuda para salir de la depresión. Lo importante es identificarlo y hablar con su médico de familia o con su terapista, con quien sea que está pendiente de su salud para que usted pueda salir de esa depresión. Así, de esta manera, este desorden afectivo estacional, en inglés lo llaman Seasonal Affective Disorder, que casualmente esas siglas dicen la palabra SAD en inglés, y también lo conocen en inglés como Winter Blues, y son de esas cosas que normalmente nos pueden afectar durante esta temporada, pero nosotros mismos podemos tratar de conseguir la forma de salir de ellas. Julia, we're talking about the triggers. Some triggers like alcohol, we can decide we're going to drink less or what is that we're going to do. We can prepare our bag of medications, but there's some others that are a little more difficult to cope with. I mean, if we're going over to our family's house, there is that family member that always asks the wrong questions or has the wrong comments at the dinner table or something like that. Is there a conversation? Is there probably a way that we can say, you know what, when you do this, this happens, this affects me. How do we cope with those?
It does take, I think, some practicing as far as communication skills go, because if a person is prepared to be able to pull a relative to the side and say, like you said, when you do this, it affects me in this way. And so I would, like it or appreciate it if you didn't do that. That's great, but for some people who are not able to do that, I mean, sometimes, especially if a person is really battling depression and is really trying very hard to maintain, a certain level of their mood, sometimes you have to avoid people, places, and things. So in the instance that and sometimes you might pull a relative to the side and they may not be receptive
Exactly.
to that feedback. So it is a matter of if you can get in front of the situation, so maybe not wait until the day of the gathering to talk to that relative. So maybe you give that person a call prior to, or visit with that person prior to the event, and share that information with them.
But here's stigma kind of comes back because we will tell someone, you know what, I have gastritis, so I can't eat this.
Yes.
Can you have, I'm a vegetarian, or I'm this, or I'm
Yes.
that, and prepare something. But we don't always, even with family or friends, say, you know what,
I'm depressed, so I
depressed.
cannot deal with you saying X or Y
Or
to
why?
me.
And
Yes.
we go back to the fact that as a society, even as families, we're not able to be upfront about these issues.
It does put a lot of responsibility on the individual who may have that mental health illness or concern, because they are the ones having to reveal something about themselves that might be, delicate in nature regarding a particular health status that is not well received. And so for some people, the technique is really avoidance, to just say, I don't want to disclose that about myself. And a person could just say, they may not have to say, I'm depressed. They could just say, when you do this during this time, it is very difficult for me to deal with that. So a person can navigate that conversation without having to reveal their complete health status.
But then, and I like the fact that you're saying where some of the responsibility goes, but as a society, it is also very important for us to create the platforms in which this can be discussed without stigma.
And I think if you're also on the receiving end of that information, because what happens is, it is not an automatic given that just because you tell a loved one that you are depressed during the holiday season, that they are going to be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Someone may encourage you, oh, you should just get over it, or it's not that serious. So a person has to also be prepared for the event that it may not be well received. But I think if you're a person who is listening to this and you may be someone who has not suffered from depression or anxiety disorders, I think it's important that we also all put ourselves in that person's shoes and say, it is a real thing. It is very common, and that we need to be receptive to that information and try and be as supportive as possible if someone close to us comes and tells us that they are battling this particular issue.
Now, it seems to me that as the executive director of the Mental Health Association of the Capital Region, you're in the forefront of creating these platforms
Yes.
where these discussions happen openly. And tell us a little bit about your organization and what you guys do.
Sure. Our organization has been around since 1957, and we originally started out in this community as a group of people who got together to advocate for people who were hospitalized at the Harrisburg State Hospital. Since then, mental health has come a long way, and so we find ourselves in positions where we are trying to advocate for consumers of mental health services, but also definitely work with the public to create the right environment and the platform for these discussions, so that people know that it is okay to get help. There is help available, and we also just want the public to have really solid information about mental health, so that we are reducing the stigma, so that we are creating the place where people feel like they can go and seek treatment if they need it.
Now, are you a volunteer-based organization? How do you get your work done?
How do we get our work done? So we are a largely based volunteer organization. So we partner with a lot of organizations, obviously
Like
Capital Blue
Cross
being one of them. But we have a variety of stakeholders, and so our work takes on multiple shapes, and we do rely a lot on collaboration to get our work done in this community.
Well, first of all, we would like to thank you for being here with us. It is such a pleasure, and thank you for shedding some light on this difficult subject, and
It was my
hopefully
pleasure,
it'll help many.
and I hope that your viewership will find this information very useful.
Bueno, damas y caballeros, terminando la conversación con Julia Mallory sobre este importantísimo tema de la depresión. Hablamos sobre que muchas veces algunos de esos disparadores, de esos ese empujoncito para tener un episodio, sufrir de un episodio de depresión, a veces no es el alcohol, no es el solo, sino un familiar que vamos a ver durante la época decembrina. Y entonces hablamos de la parte importantísima de lo que es la comunicación y el olvidar el estigma de estas enfermedades mentales que a veces no nos permiten hablar abiertamente sobre qué sucede cuando una persona nos hace alguna pregunta en la mesa que no es la apropiada o continúan comentando sobre algo en específico que puede traer a nuestras vidas un episodio de depresión. Es muy importante que todos nosotros estemos conscientes que necesitamos nosotros hablar abiertamente sobre lo que sufrimos, pero también ser buenos receptores cuando otra persona nos está hablando de que ellos o ellas padecen de una enfermedad mental. Lo importante es tener control sobre nuestra salud. Les invitamos a mantenerse en contacto con nosotros aquí en Cita con su Salud para exactamente tener un control sobre ella. Agradecemos a Capital Blue Cross el habernos tenido aquí en su sede principal en Harrisburg y le invitamos para una próxima Cita con su Salud.